So I had a really great question from one of my audience members, and that was, how can we accelerate faster? Now, I've seen this question come up in a few different cases, but I decided to really take a look at it. And to put everything in context, with relation to artificial intelligence and robotics, acceleration is the default policy. And now let me explain why. There's two primary reasons, and that is number one, geopolitics. The competition between America and China primarily is a huge economic and political driver. It's basically been accepted that whoever controls AI or whoever wins the AI race wins geopolitics for the foreseeable future, basically for the next several decades, if not century. That might be a little bit hyperbolic. We should expect another paradigm shift between now and a century from now, namely spaceflight. That might be the next big paradigm shift. The second factor that basically making acceleration the default is demographics. So this is kind of a more hidden worry, but you know how if you look at a global map and you say like every nation except for Africa, or basically every continent except for Africa, is below population replacement level in terms of total fertility rate. Many nations already have the explicit policy of, we need to figure out how to take care of our elders, and let's do it with robots, right? Japan has been doing elder care robots for a long time, but it's not just how do you take care of the elders, it's how do you keep the economy going? How do you keep the military going? So at a national level, basically every nation on the planet is concerned about demographic decline or demographic collapse. So therefore, acceleration is the default. So let me connect the dots just in case it's not entirely obvious. When I say acceleration is the default, what I mean is that at a national level, all of these nations, namely America, China, Japan, Korea, the places that are high tech but also suffering from population decline or demographic decline, America is still growing, but it's mostly due to influx of immigrants. Anyways, that means that you're going to see an engagement of political expediency, meaning that the government is going to take on the side of businesses and acceleration and deregulation, because to do so, to follow the EU, which is overregulate everything and really slow down innovation and investment, that's going to be really bad in the long run. It's bad in the short term because America is very pro-business, but it's bad in the long run because then you end up further and further behind. And in the case where you're trying to basically, you're in a race condition with aging, you cannot afford to really slow down because this is a decades-long thing, and it's a decades-long train wreck, basically. So you're going to get a lot of policies that favor acceleration in its various formats. So you might say, well, if we have these two gigantic forces that ensure that acceleration is the default policy, why would we need to accelerate faster? Isn't that irresponsible? And I will say yes. And in fact, the things that could slow down AI and robots are irresponsible use. So let's talk about a couple of examples there. Number one, and we have a really good example of technology going sideways relatively recently, and it threw a big bucket of cold water on everything. And that is, I'm talking about the FTX collapse. So if you look at the stock prices of various blockchain and crypto companies and blockchain and crypto ETFs, many of them have not recovered from the pre-FTX collapse. So I remember in a video that I made around that time, someone asked me like, what does this mean? And I said, you know, the well has been poisoned. And it turns out that was a correct, hindsight being 2020, that was a correct inference or interpretation of the events. So if you don't remember, basically Sam Bankman-Fried, who ran FTX, huge fraudster, he's presently in prison for what he did, lost literally billions and billions of dollars worth of crypto, and it was the most like inept kind of way. It was a hot mess. So anyways, that threw a bucket of cold water on investment dollars into crypto and blockchain that got the attention of regulators and everyone else. And so when you have that much negative press, that entire industry has been set back literally years, and it has not yet fully recovered. So we need to avoid an FTX-like collapse for AI and robotics. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that AI has survived a lot of controversies already. From education, people like, oh, well, what do we do about tests? What do we do about students using AI? And even within education, it's divided. A lot of educators are like, use the AI. This is the best technology that has come out to help education. Whereas some are like, but what about tests? Who cares? Copyright lawsuits, artist revolts and strikes, AI psychosis, election interference. AI has already survived a lot of controversies. So then you might ask the question, what are the controversies that might be an FTX-like event for artificial intelligence? And I came up with 2 examples that I think would be big enough. Number 1, jobs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But if jobs start going away, that is the quickest way to become the most unpopular technology in the history of mankind. Why? The way that I characterize it is that particularly we Americans, we have Stockholm Syndrome with our work. Don't take my job from me. Now, I need to clarify here that I believe that we will get to a post-labor society where you don't need a job to make money. And I understand that in the meantime, you need your job to make ends meet, because if you don't have a job, I'm working too. I'm just working at home in my camera, in front of my camera at 7 in the morning. You need a job to make ends meet. Otherwise, you end up, homeless and hungry and that sort of thing. So I get it. I get that that's the way the world works right now. I don't think it's the way the world will always work. However, not everyone agrees with me and not everyone is on the same page. So what a lot of people see is CEOs and politicians and whoever else saying, we're going to, lay off 10,000 people or 11% of our workforce, and it's going to be AI. And, even though the mainstream news is not really covering it, I repost it every time I see it, particularly over on Twitter. It's like, look, someone said the quiet part out loud. Jobs are going away due to AI. It's being automated away. And by the way, AI is just an automation technology. There are many other automation technologies. So if you take a bigger view and look at all automation technologies, the trend is really accelerating. So that's one thing that could really sour the population on AI. And I think that, maybe the 2028 presidential election or 2030 midterms, by then, we'll probably really be feeling the bite of artificial intelligence and job layoffs. So those elections could be a total referendum on what's our relationship with artificial intelligence. Could be. Another thing that could really poison the well of artificial intelligence and automation is homegrown terrorists. And what I mean is people using AI to create chemical weapons or bioweapons. BioX-Risk is one of the things that I actually agree with a lot of the doomers about, is like, hey, these tools really dramatically lower the threshold of making chemical weapons and biological weapons. Now, I have looked into it, and a lot of the things that you need are very expensive equipment or very highly controlled reagents. So, one of the things is just because the information is out there doesn't mean that it's automatically an information hazard. And this is me kind of just like temping it down, saying like, look, I'm not the only person that's looked into this. A lot of the sensitive equipment and a lot of the sensitive materials you need to be licensed for, and are also very expensive and are very tightly controlled already, because the government, with all of its infinite wisdom, said, hey, what, they go to law enforcement, they go to FBI, CIA, they say, hey, or actually those intelligence agencies often do this on their own. They say, what if you had the recipe for this? How easy could it be to build a explosive device or chemical device or biological device? And they try it out in their own kitchens, so they know how difficult it is. Anyways, AI might lower the threshold even further. So if either of those two things happens, if we have a surge in unemployment, surge in layoffs, and then and or also either or, if there is a homegrown terrorist event where AI was a significant contributor to some catastrophic loss of life, then people would rightly be very concerned about artificial intelligence and would vote against it, and we would end up with a very strong anti-AI sentiment, already stronger than what we've got. Because right now, there's pro-AI and anti-AI people, and it's more or less equal in the grand scheme of things, I think, when you look at internet debates. Now, polls show something else where, 60% of Americans are worried about AI, and, 70% hate AI, and 80% think that robots are bad, whatever. But the thing is expressed values, polls, do not reveal, are not a good way of getting revealed preferences, which is someone might say, this is my value on one hand, but then what they do with their money or their votes can be very different. This is why it's almost impossible to predict elections. So anyways, speaking of elections, this is not a left versus right thing. Now, one thing that amuses me greatly about my audience is sometimes you people are like, why are you so anti-Trump? Why are you so anti-liberal? The reason that you can't nail me down is because I don't like either side. Now, I'm not saying that I'm anti-political or I'm libertarian or anarchist. I just look at the system and say, it's kind of messed up. So whichever team you, excuse me, it's allergy season. So if I sound a little scratchy, that's why. It's ragweed here in North Carolina. Anyways, so whichever side you go to bat for, great. You know what? Like, I can see both sides have some points. Both sides have some things that are severely wrong with them. We don't need to relitigate that. It's been done plenty of times on every other podcast, on every other channel, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I do want to point out two very specific Achilles heels on both sides of the political spectrum here in America. First, the GOP, the Republicans, their deregulation scheme that they're doing right now could come back to bite them in the butt. Here's what I mean by that is, okay, so right now, the Trump administration has rescinded Biden's executive order on artificial intelligence. They've said explicitly, we're not going to regulate anything. Just go, 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 go. So what happens, though, is that means everything goes a little too far. The pendulum swings really far, excuse me, really far one direction. And then for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what happens if that pendulum swings so far that it gets deregulated to the point that there's copyright issues, there's labor strikes, whatever else happens, job layoffs start to accelerate. So then the population sours on it and the pendulum swings back the other way. So then what's the DNC going to do? If this happens in 2028 or 2030, the Democrats are going to overregulate. And the biggest complaint I have about the Democrats, not to make it too political, is that they tend to engage in what is called performative legislation. They pass bills that feel good, but are usually counterproductive. So there's two examples that immediately come to mind. Number one, New York City banned the sale of dogs in pet stores, and ostensibly the reason was to cut down on puppy mills. But this is kind of a out of sight, out of mind. So New York City is like, we're not going to sell dogs anymore, whether or not they're legitimate. And so what happens? All the legitimate businesses shut down, and now puppy mills are the only producers of dogs. That's one example. Another example is rent control. Rent control never works. Rent control reduces supply. If you want to look at areas or states where rents are going down, look at Texas. One of the reasons that rents are going down in Texas is because they're building like crazy. And if you have rent control, then nobody's incentivized to build. Nobody's even incentivized to maintain their buildings. Rent control is bad for everyone. But the Democrats love this kind of performative legislation. So what are they going to do? They're probably going to pass the same kind of basically rent control for AI, feel good, warm and fuzzy legislation that actually just hurts everyone. So what I'm here to say is that it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you're on. The government can mangle this either way. Both sides can mess it up. And therefore, while acceleration is the default, we can still snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. All right, that's my rant for the day. Thanks for watching. Cheers.